She said, "I miss the young and wild you, the jealous one." But what she didn't realize was that her things were already in the trash. And the jealousy? Oh, it's still here. It's just taken a different form. A colder, sharper form. Betrayal isn't always about catching someone in the act. It's the quiet moments, the small shifts, the gut feelings that whisper long before the truth screams at you. For me, it all started with a fleeting glance. A glance she didn't think I noticed. But that glance? That was just the beginning. Emma and I had been married for nearly a decade, and for most of it I thought we were solid. But lately there was this distance. It wasn't just in the way she avoided sitting too close or how her laugh sounded different. It was in the way she looked at me, like she was searching for something I wasn't anymore. One night, as we sat in silence after dinner, she broke it with a line that hit harder than I expected. "You know," she said, swirling her wine, "I miss those days when you were young, jealous, and unpredictable. You used to fight for me. Now you don't even raise your voice." I kept my face calm, gave her a short nod, but inside, that cut deep. Part of me wanted to ask, fight for what? For who? But I didn't. That night, as I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, doubt started to creep in. Maybe I'd let things slide too much. Maybe I'd gotten too comfortable. But if she wanted the wild me back, she'd get him. The only question was, would she like it? It started innocently enough, as these things often do. We were at a party, one of those casual gatherings where people drink cheap wine, exchange polite smiles, and talk about things they only half care about. I wasn't exactly thrilled to be there, but Emma insisted we go. She said it would be fun, though I wasn't entirely sure who it was supposed to be fun for. About an hour in, I was nursing my second beer, making small talk with one of the hosts, when I saw her. Emma was across the room, standing near the kitchen with a guy I recognized vaguely from the office stories she'd told. Charlie, her younger colleague. He was maybe 10 years younger than me, all bright smiles and eager energy, the kind of guy who tries too hard to seem effortless. At first, it seemed harmless. They were just talking, nothing out of the ordinary. But then, her body language shifted. It was subtle. She leaned in closer, tilted her head slightly, and her laugh was different. It wasn't the laugh I'd heard for years. The one filled with familiarity and warmth. This laugh was lighter, higher, the kind that's meant to draw attention. And then she touched his shoulder. It was quick, casual, like she was emphasizing a point in the conversation. But to me, it might as well have been a spotlight. I froze for a moment, watching. My stomach tightened, and a slow, cold anger started to creep in. It wasn't just the touch. It was the way she smiled at him after. Like they were sharing some inside joke. Something private. Something I wasn't part of. I glanced around the room. No one else seemed to notice. To them, it was just two people chatting at a party. But to me, it was something else entirely. I thought about walking over there, making my presence known. The old me, the guy she claimed she missed, would have done exactly that. I'd have gone up to Charlie, stared him down, and made it crystal clear that whatever he thought was happening here wasn't going to happen. But I didn't move. I stayed exactly where I was, sipping my beer, pretending I didn't see a thing. Because I realized something in that moment. Warnings are for people who deserve the benefit of the doubt. And neither of them did. I decided to let it play out. Not because I didn't care, but because I cared enough to do this the right way. Anger? That's easy. But control? That's where the real power is. Once I would have warned him. But this time I had a better plan. Later that night, after the party, I found myself lying awake in bed while Emma slept beside me. Her breathing was soft and steady, the way it always was when she slipped into sleep before me. I stared at the ceiling, my mind spiraling back to a time when things felt simpler. There was a day years ago when we took a spontaneous road trip. No destination, no plan. Just the two of us, a battered map stuffed into the glove compartment, and a playlist of Bob Dylan songs humming through the speakers. We drove for hours, windows down, her hair whipping in the wind as she sang along, laughing every time she messed up the lyrics. I remember glancing at her during one of those moments, and this overwhelming thought hit me. This is it. This is what forever feels like. She was my home back then. Not the kind of home made of brick and mortar, but the kind you carry with you, the kind you build with trust, laughter, and shared dreams. But somewhere along the way, that version of us faded. It wasn't a single moment or event. It was gradual, like a slow leak you don't notice until the damage is done. The road trip stopped, replaced by errands and routine. The laughter became less spontaneous, more forced. And Bob Dylan? He got replaced by silence. I used to look at her and see everything I wanted in life. Someone who understood me, who made me believe in forever. But now, I wasn't so sure we ever meant the same thing when we said that word. To her, maybe forever was about the excitement, the unpredictability. To me, it was about the commitment, the steadiness. Do you remember the days when you'd look at someone and think, this is forever? And then, one day you realize forever isn't something you lose. It's something that changes. I think that's when it hit me. I hadn't lost Emma, not really. What I'd lost was the illusion I'd built around her, the person I thought she was. And when that illusion crumbles, what's left behind isn't love. It's just a stranger with familiar habits. But here's the thing about losing an illusion. It's freeing. It hurts like hell, sure, but it also opens the door to something new, something you never saw coming. I turned on my side that night, watching her sleep, and I felt a strange mix of sadness and clarity. I realized I was standing at a crossroads. One path led back to trying to hold on to something that had already slipped away. The other, it led to something I didn't fully understand yet, but I knew it was mine to figure out. And for the first time in a long time, I wasn't afraid to take that step. Started as just another evening. Emma had come home from work, breezing through the front door with a kind of energy I hadn't seen in a while. She seemed lighter, like something had put a little extra bounce in her step. I noticed it, but I didn't say anything. Instead, I stayed quiet, watching her from across the room as she tossed her bag onto the counter and headed upstairs to shower. I sat on the couch, scrolling aimlessly through my emails. The sound of water running upstairs was steady, almost calming, but my mind wasn't at ease. Something was gnawing at me, though I couldn't quite put my finger on it. That's when her phone buzzed. It was sitting on the coffee table, right in my line of sight. Normally, I wouldn't have given it a second thought. I'm not the kind of guy who snoops. It's just not who I am. But this time, something made me glance down. And there it was. A message lit up the screen, and even though it disappeared almost as quickly as it appeared, I caught enough to make my stomach tighten. You looked amazing today. Must be a secret of yours. The name above it? Charlie. For a few seconds, I didn't move. I just stared at the now dark screen, replaying the words in my head. You looked amazing today. Must be a secret of yours. I wanted to dismiss it, to convince myself that it was innocent, harmless. Maybe a joke between coworkers? Maybe I was reading too much into it? But deep down, I knew better. A message like that? It wasn't the kind of thing a colleague sends unless there's something more going on. My first instinct was to grab the phone, to scroll through the messages and find out what the hell was really happening. My hand even twitched toward it, but I stopped myself. No, acting now wouldn't get me anywhere. If there was something going on, I needed to see the full story, not just a single piece of the puzzle. So, I leaned back, forcing myself to look calm. Even though my mind was anything but, I stared at her phone for what felt like forever, my thoughts racing. The shower upstairs shut off, and I quickly turned my eyes back to my own phone, pretending to be engrossed in whatever email was on my screen. A few minutes later, Emma came downstairs, her hair damp, her skin glowing from the heat of the shower. She smiled at me, casual, like nothing was wrong. "Hey," she said, settling onto the other end of the couch. "What are you up to?" "Not much," I replied, keeping my tone even. "Just catching up on emails." She didn't seem to notice anything was off. She picked up her phone, unlocked it, and started scrolling, completely unaware that I was watching her every move out of the corner of my eye. I kept the conversation light, but my mind was a storm. I couldn't stop thinking about that message, about the easy smile on her face, about how she seemed so comfortable. Too comfortable. You looked amazing today. Must be a secret of yours. A secret? Oh, I'd find out exactly what it was. That night, I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling while Emma drifted off beside me. Her breathing slowed, deepened, until I was sure she was asleep. I waited, motionless, listening to the quiet of the house, the soft hum of the heater kicking on. When the time felt right, I turned my head. Her phone was on the nightstand, just a few inches from her hand. I moved carefully, silently, easing myself out of bed and leaning over to grab it. My heart was pounding, the kind of heavy, steady thud you feel in your chest when you know you're about to cross a line you can't uncross. I picked up the phone and unlocked it. Her passcode hadn't changed in years. Why would it? She'd never had a reason to think I'd use it. But now, as the screen unlocked, I felt a mix of dread and resolve. The first thing I did was go straight to her messages with Charlie. I had no idea what I was expecting to find, but what I saw made my chest tighten. There were conversations going back weeks. Nothing overtly explicit, at least not yet, but plenty of flirting, plenty of moments that felt just a little too intimate. Inside jokes, compliments, mentions of grabbing drinks after work, and our little secret. I took screenshots, saving them to a hidden folder on my own phone. Not because I planned to do anything with them, at least not yet, but because I needed proof. Proof for myself, if nothing else. I sat there in the dark for a long time, holding her phone in my hands, staring at the messages. Part of me wanted to wake her up right then and demand answers. But I didn't. Instead, I put the phone back where I found it, eased myself back into bed, and stared at the ceiling once more. Whatever this was, it wasn't just a one-time thing. And whatever her secret was, I was going to find out exactly what it meant. But for now, I'd wait. Sometimes the best way to handle a storm is to let it build, to let it gather strength. Then, when the time is right, you let it break, and you make damn sure you're the one holding the reins. That night, after the first time I checked her phone, I couldn't let it go. I wasn't a man who jumped to conclusions without evidence. But what I'd seen wasn't just a coincidence or a misunderstanding. It was a trail, a breadcrumb left carelessly by someone who didn't think I was paying attention. And she was right about one thing: I'd been too calm for too long. A few nights later, Emma was asleep again, her phone right where it always was on her nightstand. I waited for that familiar rhythm in her breathing before I moved. It was almost too easy. Her trust, or maybe her underestimation of me, made her predictable. I unlocked her phone, my hand steady even though my mind wasn't. The first thing I did was go back to Charlie's messages. And this time I didn't skim, I went through everything. It wasn't just casual flirting anymore. There were texts about meeting up after work. Drinks tomorrow? Can't wait to see you in that dress again. And the one that made my stomach drop. Your husband won't find out. Promise. The timestamp showed the message was sent weeks ago, but her reply was there too, short and sweet. He doesn't even ask. He doesn't even ask. That line echoed in my head, over and over, as I scrolled through their conversations. They weren't just talking about drinks or innocent catch-ups. There was something deeper here, something planned, calculated. It wasn't the kind of relationship you could pass off as a work friendship. Screenshots. I took them all. Not just the damning texts, but everything. The jokes, the winks, the times he complimented her and she played along. I needed this. Not for some grand confrontation, not yet. But because I needed to remind myself that I wasn't crazy. This wasn't paranoia. This wasn't me misreading the situation. This was real. By the time I finished, I had a folder of screenshots saved to my own phone. I put hers back carefully, making sure it was in the exact spot she'd left it. Then I lay back in bed, staring into the darkness, my mind running a mile a minute. This wasn't just flirting anymore. It was something more, something that crossed every line. And I knew one thing for certain. Reading those texts wasn't enough. I needed to see it with my own eyes. Only then would I have what I needed to end this, for good. A few days later, I decided it was time. I'd been holding it in for too long, playing it cool, gathering my evidence. But there's only so much a man can take before he needs answers, even if he already knows what they're going to be. Emma was in the kitchen, pouring herself a glass of wine after dinner. She was humming softly, moving around like it was just another normal night in our house. But it wasn't normal, and I wasn't in the mood to pretend anymore. I leaned against the counter, arms crossed, watching her. "So," I said, my tone calm but sharp enough to make her look up. "Are you going to tell me what's going on? Or should I spell it out for you?" She tilted her head, feigning confusion. "What are you talking about, Jack?" I let out a dry laugh, shaking my head. "You're flirting with him, Emma. Charlie. Do you think I don't see it?" Her expression shifted for just a second, a flicker of something that looked like guilt or maybe just surprise. But then she recovered, putting on that dismissive smirk I'd grown to hate over the past few months. "Flirting?" she said, laughing like the idea was ridiculous. "Jack, come on. Don't be dramatic. It's just a game. You've changed so much, you know that? You don't even notice me anymore. This was the only way to get your attention." My jaw tightened. I stood there for a moment, letting her words hang in the air. A game? That's what she called it? All those texts, all those meetups. It was just some childish attempt to get my attention? I took a deep breath, keeping my voice steady. "A game, huh? Funny how your games always seem to involve him." Her smirk faltered, but she quickly masked it with another dismissive laugh. "Oh, stop it, Jack. You're overthinking this. Maybe if you weren't so cold all the time, I wouldn't have to, I don't know, find ways to get you to notice me." That was it. I'd heard enough. I didn't yell. I didn't argue. I just looked her in the eyes, my face calm, and said, "You wanted my attention? Fine. You've got it. But I promise you, it's not going to look the way you think." She blinked, caught off guard by how cold my voice was. "What's that supposed to mean?" I didn't answer. Instead, I turned and walked out of the kitchen, leaving her standing there with her glass of wine, still trying to laugh it all off. She wanted my attention? Oh, she'd get it. Every last bit of it. Just not in the way she expected. The next morning, I called my sister Susan. If there's one person I can count on in any situation, it's her. She's the kind of woman who doesn't ask unnecessary questions but always gives you exactly what you need. And right now, I needed help. "Let me get this straight," she said after I explained the situation. "You're telling me Emma's sneaking around with this Charlie guy, and you want me to help you track her?" "Not just track her," I said, my voice firm. "I need to end this, Susan. For good." She was silent for a moment. Then I heard her let out a low whistle. "All right, Jack. What's the plan?" We started that same day. Susan came over with a small GPS tracker she'd ordered online, the kind you can hide in plain sight and control from your phone. Together, we installed it on Emma's car while she was out running errands. "Think she'll notice?" Susan asked as she tucked the device neatly under the rear bumper. "She won't," I said confidently. "She's too busy thinking she's clever." Once the tracker was in place, we tested it, watching her car's location pop up in real time on my phone. It was almost too easy. But that was only part one of the plan. Next, I started making calls. By the end of the day, I'd arranged for a moving truck to be available on standby. Small enough to handle quickly, but big enough to hold every last piece of her life that I didn't want in my house anymore. Susan raised an eyebrow when I told her about the truck. "You're really doing this, huh?" "I am," I said, my voice cold and steady. She wanted me to fight for her. Well, this is my fight. And it ends when her stuff is on the curb. Susan didn't argue. She just nodded, a faint smirk tugging at her lips. "Remind me never to get on your bad side." Over the next few days, I tracked Emma's movements quietly, biding my time. Every time she told me she was working late or grabbing dinner with the girls, I'd check the app and see exactly where she really was. And every time, her car was parked somewhere it shouldn't have been. Restaurants, bars, even his apartment once. This game of hers? It was ending sooner than she thought. The truck was booked. The tracker was working perfectly. And now, all I needed was the final piece of evidence to seal the deal. It wasn't a matter of if I'd catch her. It was when. It happened on a Wednesday night. Emma had texted me around 5:30, saying she'd be working late. It was her go-to excuse these days, and honestly, I didn't even bother pretending to believe her anymore. I opened the GPS app on my phone and, sure enough, her car wasn't anywhere near her office. Instead, the little blinking dot showed her parked at a bar on the other side of town, a place I'd never heard her mention before. I sat in the living room for a moment, staring at the screen, debating my next move. Then I grabbed my jacket, slid my phone into my pocket, and walked out the door. The drive over was quiet. Too quiet. The radio was off, and the only sound was the hum of the engine and the occasional tap of my fingers on the steering wheel. I wasn't angry anymore. That part had burned out weeks ago. Now I was focused, cold. When I pulled into the parking lot, her car was right where the tracker said it would be. I parked a few spots away, staying low as I scanned the crowd through the bar's front window. It didn't take long to find her. Emma was sitting at a high-top table near the back, laughing, her head tilted just so. And there he was, Charlie, leaning in like the eager little puppy he was, hanging on her every word. For a second, I just watched, not out of hesitation but to take it all in. Her body language, the way she was leaning toward him, the way her hand brushed his forearm when she laughed. It was like seeing her through someone else's eyes. Someone who thought they knew her but didn't know a damn thing. I pulled out my phone and hit record, zooming in just enough to capture their embrace when it finally happened. She reached out, touched his cheek, and he leaned in like it was the most natural thing in the world. It wasn't a kiss, not yet, but it didn't need to be. Her laugh was the part that got to me. It wasn't the laugh she gave me, the quiet, familiar one I used to love. No, this was something else entirely. It was the laugh of someone who thought their secret was safe. But that secret, it was about to go public in the worst way. Once I had everything I needed, I stopped recording, slipped my phone back into my pocket, and walked out. I didn't go inside. I didn't confront them. Not yet. This wasn't about causing a scene. It was about making sure there was no way she could deny it later. When I got home, I sat down at the kitchen table, replaying the video a few times. It was all there, her smile, his touch, the way they looked at each other. The kind of evidence you can't argue with. And now it was just a matter of timing. Because the next move wasn't hers, it was mine. The day after I caught them, I woke up earlier than usual, with a clear purpose in my head. There was no hesitation, no second guessing. I was done. Emma had left for work without a word, same as always, assuming everything in her little world was perfectly intact. But she was about to learn what it felt like when that world came crashing down. I started with the closet. Her side, obviously. Clothes, shoes, bags, all of it. I didn't bother sorting or folding. It all went straight into black trash bags, one after the other. Dresses I'd bought her for anniversaries. Heels she'd worn to parties where she'd introduced me as the love of her life. Every single item gone. Next was the bathroom. Makeup, skincare, the expensive perfume she always wore, into the bags. I even took the toothbrush holder. If it was hers, it was leaving. I moved to the dresser, the nightstand, the little knickknacks she kept scattered around the house. Photos of us? I pulled them from their frames and tossed them into the pile. Jewelry? Into the bags. By the time I was done, the house didn't just feel empty of her. It felt clean. I wasn't doing this in anger. I wasn't yelling or throwing things. I was calm, methodical. This wasn't about losing control, it was about taking it back. Once everything was packed up, I carried the bags out to the curb, one by one, lining them up neatly for the whole neighborhood to see. It was trash day tomorrow, and the timing couldn't have been more perfect. When the last bag was in place, I stepped back and took a picture. The row of bags sat there under the bright winter sky, like a monument to everything I was leaving behind. I didn't feel relief, not yet, but I did feel something else. A sense of finality, like I was closing the door on a chapter of my life that had gone on for far too long. But this was just the start of her punishment. She wanted my attention. She was about to get it, and so was everyone else. I was in the living room when I heard her car pull into the driveway. It was later than usual. She'd probably stopped somewhere after work, completely unaware of what was waiting for her. I didn't move. I just sat there, waiting, as the front door opened and her heels clicked against the floor. "Jack?" she called out, her voice light, like nothing was wrong. "I'm home." I didn't respond. I just listened as she moved toward the bedroom. Then the silence. A pause. A long one. "Jack?" she called again. But this time her voice was sharper, tinged with confusion. She came back down the hallway, and when she stepped into the living room, her face was pale. "What's going on?" she asked, her eyes wide. "Where's all my stuff?" I leaned back in my chair, calm as ever, and met her gaze. "Your things," I said casually, like it was a ridiculous question. "They're outside, by the curb." She stared at me, like she couldn't believe what she just heard. What are you talking about?" I stood up, walking toward her slowly, and stopped just a few feet away. "You said you missed the young and wild me," I said, my voice low and steady. "Well, now you can be young and wild on your own." For a moment, she didn't say anything. Her mouth opened, then closed, as if she couldn't quite process what was happening. "Jack, you're not serious," she finally whispered. "Oh, I'm dead serious." I nodded toward the door. "Everything's out there. You should probably grab it before the trash truck comes tomorrow." She looked like she might cry, but I didn't feel an ounce of sympathy. "Not anymore." "What is wrong with you?" she shouted, her voice cracking. I tilted my head. "Wrong with me?" I said, almost laughing. "I think the better question is, what's wrong with you, Emma?" "Flirting with Charlie. Meeting up with him after work. Thinking I wouldn't notice. Did you think I was stupid?" Her face crumbled, and she started to stammer something, but I cut her off. "Save it," I said. "I've heard enough. You wanted my attention, right? Well, now you've got it. Congratulations." The next morning, I made good on my promise. The video I'd taken of her and Charlie at the bar, their cozy little moment captured in perfect clarity, was ready to go. I uploaded it to social media with a caption that was short, simple, and sharp. Some people want drama. Sometimes they get it. I didn't tag her, but I didn't have to. Within hours, the video started picking up traction. People shared it, commented on it, and within no time it had gone viral. Emma's name wasn't in the post, but it didn't take long for people to connect the dots. Her friends started calling, texting, leaving voicemails, most of which, I imagine, went unanswered. By the end of the day, she was a ghost. Charlie, the guy she'd been so cozy with, wasn't much better off. His co-workers distanced themselves, his social media went quiet, and even his friends seemed to vanish. Turns out, being the other guy doesn't win you many fans. As for Emma, well, she wanted me to change. She wanted chaos. She wanted excitement. And now she was living right in the middle of it. "You wanted my attention?" I thought. "Well, you've seen what I'm capable of now." A few days later, Emma showed up at the house. I wasn't expecting her, but part of me knew it was only a matter of time. She looked like a wreck, her hair messy, her face pale, her eyes red from what I could only assume was hours of crying. She knocked on the door, hesitant at first, then harder when I didn't immediately answer. I could have ignored her, but instead, I opened it. Not because I wanted to hear her out, but because I wanted to make sure there was no room left for doubt. "Jack," she started, her voice trembling. "Can we talk? Please." I crossed my arms, leaning against the doorframe. "Talk about what, Emma?" Her lip quivered, and the tears started to fall. "I was wrong," she said, her voice cracking. I just wanted your attention. That's all. I didn't mean for any of this to happen. I didn't mean to hurt you." I stared at her, unmoving, letting the weight of her words hang in the air. There was a time when those tears would have broken me, when I would have done anything to comfort her. But that time had long passed. "You wanted my attention?" I said, my voice cold and steady. "Well, you got it. But here's the thing, Emma. I'm not the man you want anymore." Her face crumpled, and she started to reach for me. But I took a step back, shaking my head. "No," I said firmly. "This isn't a fix-it moment. You made your choices, and now you get to live with them." She tried again, babbling through tears about how she'd messed up, how she didn't mean for things to go this far. But I wasn't interested in her apologies. "I've become someone who doesn't care for your excuses, Emma," I said, stepping back and closing the door in her face. "Goodbye." And just like that, I was done. The weeks that followed weren't easy, but they were mine. For the first time in years, I wasn't carrying the weight of her expectations or trying to fix something that was never meant to last. I threw myself into rebuilding my life. I hit the gym again, rediscovering the strength I thought I'd lost. I reconnected with old friends, people I'd pushed aside over the years because I was too busy trying to keep my marriage afloat. I found hobbies I hadn't touched in years. I went hiking, spent hours working on my car, even picked up my guitar again, strumming songs I hadn't played since I was a teenager. Slowly but surely, I started to feel like myself again. One night, sitting alone on the back porch with a glass of whiskey in hand, I thought about something my dad used to say: "Sometimes, you win by walking away from the game." He was right. But then I thought about everything I'd done, everything I'd been through, and realized something else. Sometimes you don't just walk away. Sometimes you leave ashes in your wake, a reminder to never let anyone burn you twice. And for the first time in a long time, I felt at peace.